Yeah. Okay, we are live. You are watching Wake Up Call Live with Christina Previtt. Thank you for joining us. And my guest today is Heidi Brown, also known as the Introverted Lawyer. Heidi is a law professor at Brooklyn Law School. She has authored The Introverted Lawyer, as well as Untangling Fear in Lawyering, a 4-step journey toward powerful advocacy. Thank you so much for joining me today, Heidi.
Thanks for having me. It's so nice to see a human.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So what I understand is that your specialty in terms of research is specifically helping people who have severe anxiety when it comes to public speaking. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. So it kind of all started with my own extreme public speaking anxiety. I went to law school, decades ago, and I was never the student in class with my hand in the air. I'd always done the work and I loved the research and the writing, but I was scared. I had performance anxiety, but I just kept pushing through it and thinking if I just kept doing it, it would get better. But then when I became an attorney for 15 years, I still struggled with public speaking anxiety. Then I became a law professor and I started researching it, basically because I was still scared to walk into my own classroom. And I started noticing that a lot of my amazing legal writing students were also afraid of speaking in class. So that's what prompted me to start researching it.
So it sounds like you struggled with that for a really long time in your career before you actually, I guess, came up with some methodologies to cope with it. Had you ever tried to get any kind of coaching or counseling or reading books or anything like that?
I read a lot of books, but at the time, I had good mentors and things in the law firms, but they would always give me advice, well-meaning advice, but it was always advice like, just do it. Like, just like you can put on a pair of Nikes and bungee jump into bliss, or fake it till you make it, or just prepare, just practice, just keep doing it. You'll get better. None of that ever worked for me. Not one thing that I tried. I tried trial advocacy classes, and the nerves just never went away until I started reading books about introversion, the difference between introversion and extroversion. But then what really opened my eyes was understanding the difference between introversion and shyness and social anxiety, and then realizing that I have all of those things. And then understanding that for me, I really needed to reflect on sort of my mental soundtrack that wasn't so helpful, and then physically what happens to me when I get public speaking anxiety. And because only with that reflection and that enhanced awareness could I finally start to do something about it. Just faking it never worked.
Yeah, because you want to be authentic, right? So if you're faking it, you're not being authentic. So can you explain to us the difference between introverted and shyness and the things you just described?
Sure. So our American society tends to sort of lump all those labels together. If someone is just naturally quiet, we might call them introverted, but we also might mistakenly call them shy or socially anxious or antisocial or aloof or a loner. But really introversion is completely different from shyness, social anxiety, or public speaking anxiety. So I had to learn, first of all, what is introversion? So introversion and extroversion are just the ways that different individuals process energy, the way we process information, questions and answers coming at us, and different competing stimuli. So extroverts do that externally. So, it might be really quick between the time someone asks an extrovert a question and it's pretty fast when between the question and the extrovert jumping into the conversation. Whereas an introvert processes all of that internally. If someone asks a question, we tend to pause and we're processing our ideas, our solutions to problems, our language, even the way we want to answer a question. We're doing that internally. So it can seem like we're a little slower to jump into conversation, or sometimes I realize I'm usually the last person to speak in a meeting. It's not that I'm not prepared or that I'm not interested. It's just that I'm processing all of these things internally. There's also a difference in the way we rekindle energy. So you can be a really high energy introvert, but then at a party or in a really overstimulating environment, people like us, we hit a wall and we need to retreat to quietude and solitude. All of that is different from shyness and social anxiety. Shyness and social anxiety is a fear of judgment or a fear of criticism. So you can be a very confident introvert and not be shy. You just need to rekindle your energy by yourself or listen to music. But if you're a shy introvert, on top of getting drained by highly stimulating situations, we also have a fear of judgment or criticism. And that can manifest physically, it can manifest mentally.
And there could be extroverts that have that too, right?
Yes, definitely.
So thank you for explaining that, because I think there is a lot of misperception about what is an introvert and an extrovert in our society. I think a lot of people just generally will classify someone who's the quiet one at the table. I don't want to say wallflower, but not the life of the party, right? Not the one that's, got all the bells and whistles and everybody's looking at them. They'll just automatically say that's the extrovert. Mm-hmm. And then the other people that maybe are sort of just kind of keeping to themselves, that they're introverts. But that's not necessarily true, right?
Right. There could be other reasons, like the shyness and social anxiety, why somebody isn't jumping into a conversation. We tend to kind of promote the extrovert ideal. I know when I teach, the way legal education is set up, or the way we notice people in meetings in law firms or in the courtroom, we tend to pay attention to the easy talkers, the people that are ready to jump in, have a quick answer. But I feel that a lot of times the quiet individual is listening and processing information, and often can come up with an answer or a really creative solution that everyone else who's just talking over each other can miss. So I think we overlook the quiet individuals at times.
So from a business standpoint, you probably want a good mix of both people.
Yes, we definitely, I feel like in teams, if you have introverts and extroverts who know how to get the best out of each other and give each other time to show their strengths, our teams will be much stronger, instead of just letting extroverts dominate small groups or larger groups. We really need to create platforms where introverts can amplify their voices, but authentically, going back to the point you made earlier about authenticity.
It's interesting. I consider myself an introvert because I am not shy at all. Which people will laugh at me when I say I'm an introvert. No, you're not. Stop it. Because they equate it with being shy. And I have noticed that when I'm away at a convention or something, I cannot handle even a full day of just being amongst all of the people, the crowd. I have to get away and just go to my room or go do something alone. That's probably a good sign of being an introvert.
Absolutely. I always laugh that when I go to legal conferences, same thing. Like I can be high energy, but then at all the networking breaks or the lunch breaks, happy hours, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I need to just go be by myself. And then an hour or two of being alone, I'm full of energy again, but I can't handle nonstop, hour after hour of engagement, because we concentrate when we're engaged as introverts, and it can be very draining.
Yes. I also find myself sometimes, if you've got that one friend that just talks incessantly, they just never stop talking. And I'll find myself thinking, oh my God, are they going to stop talking for even 5 seconds? So I find that draining too.
Definitely. Phone calls can be very draining for introverts when you're talking to somebody who just talks all the time, because you're trying to interrupt or intervene, but there's never any space to do it. So phone calls can be very exhausting for introverts for that reason.
Well, maybe this will be a relatively short interview then, because introverts. I find that when someone's like that, I kind of zone out a little bit. I'll just it's too much for me to fight to talk. So I just will kind of not shut down, but I just won't really try, because I don't want to work that hard.
Right, because your natural instinct is to work hard, but because it's so exhausting and you're processing your answers internally, but the person you're talking to has already moved on to 5 additional topics by then, we can be very drained by those types of dynamics.
Yeah. What about small talk? I've read in different places that introverts really don't like small talk, and I will say I don't like small talk.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And this goes back to the authenticity thing. Like we resist inauthenticity. So small talk feels fake or sort of like a time waster. So introverts can be really great one-on-one because we want to go deep with somebody. We want to talk about the weather or trivialities. We want to really know what makes that person excited about life. And that can make introverts really great friends. But we can also be very bad at like icebreakers. And anytime someone tells me in a meeting, okay, pair up, I'm like, oh no.
I know. I always hated working in a team when you would have to do a group project in school. I hated that. I always hated that.
Same. And as a teacher, I don't automatically put my students into teams too early before they know each other, because as an introvert myself, when I enter a room, I like to sit down, get my bearings, feel comfortable, and, ease into relating to other people. And then if the leader of whatever I'm walking into says, okay, now pair up or work in a team, it throws me off because I feel like I have to start all over again and feeling comfortable, finding my seat, gauging the dynamics of the other individuals. So as a teacher myself, I try to be aware of how group work can not be so helpful for introverts.
Yeah, I always thought that there was something wrong with me, like I was maybe selfish or I had some defect because I can't work in a team environment as well. But it sounds like you're saying that's not necessarily the case.
No, and that's
thank God.
No. I'm going to tell you, I felt the same way. Like it was a weakness, that there's something wrong with me. But through all this research, so I read about 26 books on these topics, and I realized that we bring tremendous assets. Quiet individuals or introverts bring tremendous assets to teams. It's just that we get overlooked. So it's not that we have a weakness. It's just that we operate differently and in a good way. So I've totally reframed my relationship with what I used to think was a weakness that now I feel like is a strength. The hard part is for us to communicate that to other people who are just used to judging participation by the extrovert standard. So it's hard for us to be ambassadors for introversion, but it's important.
So would you say that if you have a group of people, is it a disadvantage or not necessarily if everybody was an introvert or everybody was an extrovert?
I think a mix is good. I think that if you have too many extroverts in a room, no one's going to kind of pause and listen, because extroverts get excited and they gain energy by talking and interacting. But if you have too many introverts as well, we could just be we work well independently, so we might not have that crossover of idea sharing. So a mix of people who are aware of the strengths that both personality types bring to relationships and to work environments, that's huge. We can't just throw a mix of people in there because the extroverts will dominate. Yeah. So we have to throw a mix of people together, but that have awareness about the strengths that each type of personality brings.
Do you have any opinion about how this works in a dating relationship?
I'm probably not the best ambassador for that, since I'm like perfectly content to like be alone and do not put myself out there as much as I realizing now need to do more of, since I'm spending this whole pandemic alone.
You probably love it though.
It's been great. I just realized, okay, maybe when this is over, I need to make an effort on the dating front. But yes, I have found that it's challenging to explain introversion in the dating world to people that don't understand it. So like I can go and sit at a bar or restaurant by myself and have dinner. I love to travel. I eat alone. And when I explain that, and I love to travel alone, but when I explain that to people in the dating world, they kind of sometimes think that sounds selfish. Like I can just wander through life. I don't need anybody. That's not true. It's just that I feel very happy and calm when I have that silence and quietude. So it's all about communication and explaining what we need. I have been in relationships where I've lived with someone else and it took a while to explain to them that when I got home, this is when I worked in a law firm environment, when I got home, I needed an hour to just chill. And
Yeah.
I wasn't ready to go to a party or get dressed up and interact with other people. I really needed that decompression time. And then I could go be social.
Yeah.
Also explaining how at parties and other social engagements that it wasn't that I wasn't having a good time. I just didn't want to, work the room and introduce myself to everybody. So again, it just comes down to communicating how we thrive.
Yeah. Well, I'm the same way. I love to go out to eat by myself. I go to the movies by myself. I've traveled by myself, and I will get the occasional friend that'll just kind of feel like, I don't know, like it's a little weird. Like, why would you go sit at a restaurant by yourself? They think it's like kind of sad, And I'm like, no, it's great. I just sit there. I people watch. I have quiet. I'm in my space.
Exactly. It's not sad at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. So, but I admire you for continuing to put yourself in these situations that I'm sure were causing you anxiety. But like you were on a mission, you were going to overcome this. That's what it sounds like.
Yes, but it's not like a light switch you can flip on and that everything's fine. And to be honest with you, I was even nervous about this today. So like it's just a process that I always have a little bit of that social anxiety or performance anxiety, but through writing these books, I understand that it's just I have this mental soundtrack that isn't always so helpful. And I also physically feel anxiety in certain parts of my body. So I have to do like power poses and stand in a strong stance. It sounds cheesy, but it works. And I know that if I can once I start to realize, okay, I'm just nervous again, this is just my introversion kicking in because I don't know how like a live conversation is going to go, or it's just my shyness or social anxiety. But now I know how to process it. I know how to realize it, acknowledge it, remind myself that I've worked really hard on this. I know, I have lived the life. I mean, I've walked the walk or talked the talk. So I know that this works if I can just put my systems into place and set myself up to have a good experience and have a good conversation. And also being authentic, it doesn't have to go perfectly. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It's much better to be real.
Well, if you are nervous at all, I cannot tell. You have not told me at all. What would you say on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst? Like at your worst, what number were you?
Like a 55. I was bad. It was really bad.
Well, what would you say it is more typically now these days?
Now it really depends on the situation. Sometimes I won't be nervous at all, and then in the middle of the thing, it kind of goes off the rails. And then sometimes I'll be incredibly nervous beforehand, but then I put my systems into place, and I'll be nervous for like the first 30 seconds of something, and then I get excited and I start to enjoy it. Whereas way before I understood this about myself, I have a really robust blushing response. So when I get nervous, I turn bright red, and then I get self-conscious about it. So when I was an attorney, I would be in depositions and be nervous, or also just as an introvert need time to process how I was going to object to a question, but there's all this pressure to be fast.
Yeah.
I would turn really red, and then I would feel embarrassed. So it just kind of was a vicious cycle. Now I know that's still going to happen sometimes, and I can feel it when I'm teaching, or I misquote something, or I misspeak in a faculty meeting or some presentation, and I'm like, okay, it's not the end of the world. I'm not going to die if I blush during this presentation.
Yeah.
So while it still does fluctuate, sometimes I can have level 10 anxiety. I'm much faster at scrolling it down a little bit, dialing down the notch of the worry, of the fear of what people are going to think, and then really appreciating my introversion and knowing that, hey, if I'm the last person to speak in a meeting, who cares? If I need to follow up with an email because I couldn't quite articulate something perfectly, who cares? So,
yeah. Well, let's talk about your steps, because for people that are watching that have this issue, I want to know how we can help them. So can you go over your steps?
Sure. So I have this sort of 7-step process that really works for me. It might not work for everybody, but it really helps me. And also just having a process is huge, because when I do feel that sense of nervousness, I have something that can help me control my emotions, my physical reactions. So the first 2 steps go hand in hand, and they're reflection. So the first step is mental reflection, and the second step is physical reflection. So I'll just explain what that means. So before, when I was just trying to apply the just do it or fake it till you make it mantras, I was never stopping to really pause and understand what was happening to me mentally. So the mental reflection piece is when we're anticipating a situation that might make us uncomfortable or nervous, or we step into one and we realize we're uncomfortable or nervous. We have to really listen to our mental soundtrack. Now, this can be not so fun because some of us have unpleasant mental soundtracks, but for me, it was huge to really sit there and listen. What am I telling myself about my ability in this situation that really isn't true, but that I'm telling myself? So literally writing down the words. And it's remarkable when you realize these negative messages that we tell ourselves about our ability. Okay, I'm quiet. Oh my gosh, I'm the last person to speak in this meeting again. They're going to think I'm stupid. No, like, so the key to this, though, is trying to reflect on where we've heard this before. And while there's this great book by this woman, Ivy Naistat, she wrote Speak Without Fear. She says this is not a blame game. We're not going to call up our high school coach or our 5th grade teacher and say, you ruined my life. But it's important to realize, okay, where did we absorb these messages in our past? Maybe from well-meaning people, but that we've sort of misinterpreted and warped a little bit about our abilities in the present. And can we let that go? So that was a long-winded explanation, but step 1 is mental reflection, listening to our soundtrack. Step 2, the physical reflection, is much easier and more fun, but it's really doing sort of like a physical inventory of how our physical bodies react to that same stressor. So for me, it was realizing, okay, I blush. I also have a habit of trying to get small. My body just instinctively caves in. I get small. I cross my arms. I cross my legs. But all that does for me is block my energy, oxygen, and blood flow. So then I can't breathe. And then my heart starts racing faster. And it's just a vicious cycle. So steps 1 and 2 are reflecting and really getting to know ourselves. Steps 3 and 4 are taking that new information and coming up with a new mental action plan for step 3 and a new physical action plan for step 4. What are we going to do when we realize that we're just repeating our old patterns? Okay, we have to stop. It's kind of like the firefighter mantra we heard when we were kids, like stop, drop, and roll.
Yeah.
Okay, this is just my bad mental soundtrack again. I can stop, realize I can do this. I'm prepared. I know what I'm talking about. And then physically, open back up, stand like an athlete, and step into their performance with strength.
Do you have sort of a mantra?
Yeah, I mean, I constantly remind myself. I mean, my old messages were just really unpleasant, and so my new messages are, hey, stop. This is just your old messages again. And then literally I'll just say, hey, you know what you're talking about. You're prepared for this. You've done the work. You're entitled to say how you feel in your own voice. You don't need to mirror someone else's behavior. It doesn't have to go perfectly. You just have to be real. Now go. So it's just kind of stuff like that works for me, but everybody might have a different mantra.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot to do, but I imagine if you work on it before it actually happens, it probably happens quickly when you're in the moment and you start to recognize, almost like muscle memory. You just kind of do it automatically over time when it happens.
Absolutely. The hard work is really the reflection part, and that does take some time, and it's not as fun because you do need to sort of remember situations in the past that might have reinforced this anxiety or fear, or messages about our introversion that just aren't true. So that part takes some time. I did it through journaling and really writing down things so I could see it on paper. But then to your point, when you're in the moment, now for me, as long as I'm aware and recognizing that this is happening again, it literally takes me 30 seconds to snap out of it. I can go, okay, I'm ready. And then I have to do my,
great.
Yeah, 30 seconds. I might have to repeat it another 30 seconds, 5 minutes later, or maybe 10 minutes later if the normal automatic responses creep back in, but literally 30 seconds and you can reframe yourself.
Are there certain events that trigger it more than others? Like, do you ever have this when you teach now because you've been teaching for so long?
I still do. And but the thing is, I tell my students that. So I always, it's usually in teaching the beginning of a new semester, a new year with a new group of students. Or if I'm doing a presentation to students, sometimes I do oral argument anxiety workshops, and they're not my students. They're other students that just want to come to the workshop, so they don't know me and we don't have that trust relationship yet. I get nervous, but what I do now is I just say it out loud. And I've had people say, oh, you shouldn't admit that, it shows weakness. Yeah. I don't care.
The students smell weakness.
Who cares? And then this is funny, but this might seem funny, but I get nervous every time I have to speak at a faculty meeting, which is so ridiculous. I've been out of law school for 25 years. I was a litigator for like 2 decades. I've been teaching a long time. I know what I'm talking about, but when I say it, when I anticipate saying things about, teaching or policy or budgets or whatever, it's that fear that my peers are going to judge me. But then I catch myself and I apply the techniques that I mentioned and I get through it. Again, it doesn't always go perfectly, but at least I know I did the best I could in those moments.
Is part of your dialogue in your head, a coach that I know always says, is that true? So if I'm thinking, oh my God, everybody's looking at me, this was the dumbest idea ever, I shouldn't have said it. I try to ask myself, is it really true?
Right.
Is everybody really thinking like, what a dumb idea that was? Are they busy thinking about what they want to have for lunch, or who knows?
Exactly. They're not laser focused on us like we think they are.
We're laser focused on us.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when I get into a zone like that, I will say that to myself is, okay, slow down. I'll talk to myself and just say, people are focused on themselves. They are not as focused on you as you think they are.
That's so true. And then what I learned from that, though, you just made me think about how important it is that when we see somebody else who looks like they're experiencing anxiety or fear, we tell them afterwards that they did a good job. Because I feel like it makes such a difference to me when I hear back from somebody, like I'll go do a presentation, I'll be judging myself, so hard on myself. And if one person ever says to me, hey, thank you, or wow, that quote you read or that thing you said, that really meant something to me, I think, okay, one person, I did my job, I reached one person. So I try to be that one person for others who might go through what we go through.
And do you find yourself looking for the introverts in your students? You're probably extra sensitive to it.
And it's so fun when I realize, so I teach writing, and so but my students speak in class and all that, but what's so remarkable, I grade anonymously, and then when I do the big reveal, and the top papers are 9 times out of 10 my quietest students, because they're the ones who are sitting there thinking and processing and analyzing. And I don't pressure them to speak early in the year. Like, I try to create an environment where they can learn how to amplify their voices authentically, like we're talking about. But it's so cool when I see that these really brilliant legal minds, these new legal minds, are often the quiet, introverted students. And I try to tell them, look, you are cut out for this profession. You can do this. You do not have to fake extroversion. You don't have to be loud. Be your quiet, impactful self. And then obviously there's times when we do have to speak, And then I share what I've shared with you about how to do that, but more authentically.
Yeah, I've learned a lot just from this conversation. I definitely make judgments about people and what their skills are based upon how readily they speak publicly. And I think that's absolutely not accurate.
It's a natural thing that we do as humans, but we can be more conscious of it and aware. And then when somebody who's been quiet in a meeting, or somebody that we've never really interacted with suddenly comes up with this incredibly cool idea or solution to a problem, or writes something that's totally amazing, I think we need to say that out loud. And it's not that we're coddling people or just, being super positive for no reason. This is important, because if we don't do this, we miss out on these truly amazing voices just because we're used to promoting the extroverted ideal. But there's so many incredible people out there that are more on the quiet side, but they're thinking and they're creating, and they're just amazing humans.
Yeah, as a business owner, I have a staff and I own a law firm. And I'm just kind of looking back on a lot of firm meetings that we've had, and different people that I've had over the years that were quiet and would sit at the table and really not engage. At least I call it engage. They weren't really talking openly. And I would feel like they were disinterested. That's what I felt. That's what I assumed. And then every once in a while, they would come up with something that was just brilliant, a brilliant suggestion. I'd be like, oh my God, she has been listening all this time. So I was probably being a little unfair, not intentionally, but obviously she's an introvert. And it wasn't that she was disengaged. She just, was being herself and taking it all in.
Yeah. And I think as leaders, as business leaders like you are, and like I lead my classroom, there's ways that we can encourage quiet individuals to participate that are different from normal participation. Like, for instance, if people aren't ready to articulate ideas in meetings, they can follow up an email. Or I've been really excited to see how, trying to teach on Zoom or all these other virtual platforms, there's actual tools or technology tools for people to participate through chats and written dialogue, or the hand raising tool that, I wish we had that in real life. because people can participate and throw ideas out there without having to interrupt somebody, without having to fight for the platform to be able to speak. So
the books that you've written so far, though, have been geared towards lawyers and law students, right? Do you have anything in the works, or would you consider writing something that's really just meant for the general public?
Yes, I would love to do that. I have written about the law because it's what I know, but the thing that I've been working on, or kind of an idea that I've percolating, what helps me get through all this is trying to treat myself like an athlete. And I am totally not an athlete. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Yes, I am. I work out. I take boxing lessons, and I like. So I've been trying to percolate an idea, or I have this idea that's sort of a germ of an idea of taking like sports coaching and performance coaching and applying that to a range of professions. I mean, athletes don't think they know everything. They have coaches, right? And for me, I feel like us as professionals, it doesn't have to be limited to the law, but in any profession where some of us do grapple with performance anxiety, we can learn a lot from athletes and musicians and other stage performers about how to process anxiety, fear, making mistakes, recovering from mistakes. So that's something that I'm thinking about, and I'm happy. I'm really
Please do it. It is so needed, because think about how many people, what is that saying? It's kind of a joke, but I think it's true that people fear public speaking more than death.
It's true.
I mean, it sounds crazy, right? But I know so many people that in law school that would not go into any litigation fields because they were terrified to go to court.
Right, and I think that's such a sad message. I heard that a lot because I was so scared. My mentors and people would, again, well-meaning, but they would say, well, why did you go into litigation? You should have gone into transactional law. But I'm like, well, that's not really the answer here, because in transactional law, you still have to negotiate, make presentations. And I also had people say, well, why did you go to law school at all? And I don't think that's the right message. We should instead say, it's okay if you have public speaking anxiety. Even as a lawyer, here's how to work on it and here's how to process it. And it doesn't mean that you should opt out of a certain type of law or the profession as a whole. You can do this. Everybody can do it.
Yeah, and it's not even just lawyers. I mean, think about all of the people out there that are missing out on wonderful careers and opportunities simply because they fear public speaking and they don't think that it's something that they could ever get past.
Right, and they absolutely can get past it. In researching my second book, the Untangling Fear book, I looked to see what other professions were doing about fear and fear of making mistakes, like the medical profession, journalism school, engineering school. And every profession has certain fears. And people, if we don't talk about it out loud, like journalists might opt out of a certain type of journalism because they have to go interview somebody. Well,
yeah.
Let's not force them out of something. Let's instead help them. Same thing with medical profession. Same thing with us as lawyers.
Yeah, and I think that this public speaking is not necessarily standing at the front of a room in front of a group of people. I mean, I know people that get very nervous, paralyzed if they have to go on a job interview.
Yes, yes. It can be anything. It can be even conversing over the internet. You can be. I was realizing how much public speaking anxiety I still have at home on my couch in my sweatpants. It doesn't have to be a podium in front of 100 people or the courtroom, or you're absolutely right. It can be an interview. It can be going on a date. I mean, I definitely hold myself back from social engagements in which I'm worried I'm going to blush and some guy's going to think I look stupid. Who cares? We got to learn how to just amplify our voices and put ourselves out there and make human connections.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And please write that book, because there are so many people that need to read that book, not just lawyers. And then the other thing that I would ask you to focus on is getting the word out about a lot of the assumptions that we make about introverts and extroverts. Because I definitely, I know that I have had that understanding that, you know, if you're the gregarious one, you're an extrovert. And if you're quiet, you're an introvert, which really doesn't do it any justice. And that would really be a huge help to a lot of business people, managers. So please get that out there too.
I will, definitely. It's so important because we have so much talent in our communities that is overlooked. And people have incredible gifts and talents and strengths, but because they don't have that sort of extroverted, gregarious persona, they're taken for granted sometimes.
And I also want the people that do have a fear of public speaking, I don't want them to miss out on things. I don't want them to feel like they have to pigeonhole themselves into a certain field that doesn't really light them up because they're trying to avoid public speaking. So
I agree. I really want to empower people to sort of reject the messages of faking it, or reject messages about you're not cut out for a certain career because you're quiet. All of that makes no sense. Like we all can do this. We just need to get to know ourselves and understand how we mentally and physically and emotionally process all this stuff, and then we can kind of flip it upside down and have a new action plan.
Well, thank you for being so honest about your experience, and I hope that you will start your new book today.
You inspired me to write today, so I will.
Yes, excellent. And for people that are watching, how can they find you? How can they learn more about you and find your books?
So I have a website called theintrovertedlawyer.com. I also am on Instagram. I think that's how you and I met, on Instagram at introvertedlawyer. And I'm on Twitter at Introvert Lawyer. But I think if you Google Introverted Lawyer, I'll pop up. And my books are on the American Bar Association website, but they're also available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and wherever you can find your books.
Yeah, well, I'll post the links to everything in the comments. But thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story. I appreciate it, and I would love to have you on again sometime, especially when the new book is ready.
I would love that. You brightened my whole week, so thank you so much.
Now you have to write the book because everyone's going to think that there's a book coming out. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful week.
And thank you for watching Wake Up Call Live.